Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and however you're listening to the podcast. We appreciate that you are. John Buzby, along with Marty Sheehan. This is the Delaware High School Football Pod presented by Websites for Sports, and we're the only media outlet dedicated exclusively to high school football here in the First State. The pod's available wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, and you can find us on Facebook and X. Just Google Delaware High School Football, and it'll pop up. On today's show, the word of the day is new. It's a new season. We have new coaches. We're going to have a new championship games location. We're going to have new transfer rules. We're going to have a new regulation on the horizon, a new football program, and my recommendation, or I should say our recommendation, because I know Marty agrees, with how we need to start looking at the football schedule. And so lots to go on here as we are on the eve of the opening day of preseason practice for the majority of the football teams, across the First State. The title sponsor of the Delaware High School Football Pod, as I mentioned, is Websites for Sports, created and managed by Brian Ritter. And it's the only place you can find the schedule of every high school team in the state of Delaware. On that schedule, it tells you the home team, the away team, and where the game's going to be played, including, if you click on it, a Google map with the directions to that stadium. It's a one-stop shop for high school schedules, and many of the teams also put their stats up now after games, and we hope they continue to do so, as selfishly it certainly helps us. Here's my favorite feature. You can sign up for schedule alerts. I've already had several of my boys' schedules change, and if it wasn't for this schedule alert, I'd be sitting in the bleachers wondering why the game's not going on. So it's a great thing. You can find it on their homepage. You click on the little yellow icon, and it'll allow you to set up your schedule alerts for what teams, what schools, and everything like that. Bottom line is, if you have a kid playing in sports, or if you're a fan, Websites for Sports is your one-stop for everything that you need. We can't thank Brian Rutter enough for being a sponsor of the podcast. Just another way he's supporting high school sports. And again, the website is websites, the number 4, sports.com. That's websitesforsports.com. All right, Marty, let's get right into it here. It's hard to believe it's football season. It seems like we were just at Delaware Stadium watching what might be the last championship game ever held at Delaware Stadium. More on that when we get to it. But we also, we're going to thank our sponsors throughout the show as we go along. We've got one new one we're excited about, so we'll get into that a little bit. But let's start with the new coaches. 5 total. Sounds like a lot. Nothing compared to last year. Marty, I know you know the number off the top of your head. It was in the 20s. How many new coaches did we have last year? I think 20s. That's all right.
Yeah, there was 27% overturned coaches last year, so it was a huge turnover last year. It stopped pretty good this year. Only, as you said, only 5 new head coaches, but still some interesting new faces and some interesting new places.
All right, so there's 3 new in the Blue Hen, 1 in the Henlopen, and 1 charter new head coach, and that's actually our newest head school. We'll talk about him in a minute. Let's start with Concord High School. Darren Brody takes over for Tom Wood. Brody played at Concord under legendary coach George Kasanovich back, I believe it was right around 1990, that era there. Yep. For Concord, he's the 3rd coach in the last 5 years, Marty.
Yeah, Concord has really struggled. This is probably of all the new head coaches, Darren's probably walking into the situation that's most fraught with danger in the beginning, I would say. Concord was 1-9 last year. They won the first game of the season and lost the last 9. All but one of them was by more than 20 or more points. So they made the playoffs the 2 years before that. Amazingly, though, they were outscored in the first round of each 94-0, an aggregate score of 94-0. So this is a tough one. Darren Brody seems like a really good guy. He's got a great history there. One of his attractions to the job was to follow in Coach Kasanovich's footsteps. He said he learned so much as a football player and as a young man from Coach K, and he wanted to put that in place for other kids. He wanted them to give them the same opportunity that he was given. So he really seems excited about this job, and I asked him his first priority was to continue the Concord way, which in his mind is just treat people the right way, work hard, don't make excuses, don't take shortcuts. And I think he's fully aware of what he's walking into. And he says, look, we're going to try to get better one day at a time. It's the old coach trope, but in his case, it's true because there's a lot of work to be done. This isn't going to turn around in a hurry, but he seems like a guy who's really dedicated to getting it done there. And his heart and his soul is in the right place in this school. And having a background there is going to help a lot. So I'm excited to see what Darren does.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Concord has been falling on hard times. There was that era, Marty, you and I were, I think, just hooking up as broadcast partners when they had those brothers, and
Oh my God, the Roberts.
the Roberts
Yeah.
brothers, and Concord was supposed to be a state champion during that era at some point, and it just never happened. And they really haven't been legitimately good since then that I can
No,
remember. And
no, they
so,
had the three Roberts brothers that came through, and you and I, the big guy who was there at the time was Avery Roberts, who was just running rush shot over
yep.
everybody, but they could just never put it together against the better teams. And as you said, it just at the time it really felt like they were right on the cusp, but just couldn't get over that mountain.
Yeah. So, all right. 1-9 last year. They open up at Mount Pleasant. So, a big district game right off the bat for them. All right. At Newark High, Tyron Rice comes in, replaces Jody Russell. Rice had been an assistant for 10 years at Newark, including under Coach Butch Simpson, Coach Barry Zender, and of course, Coach Russell, where he was the defensive coordinator under Russell. He coached at Charter of Wilmington, if the name rings a bell, more than a decade ago. Played at Glasgow and played at UD. So a local guy knows what he's getting into because he's been at Newark. He knows there's not going to be 120 people show up at practice tomorrow morning like it was back in the Coach Simpson era. That's long gone for all three of the schools in the
Yeah.
Christina district, quite frankly. But Rice seems to, be excited about the opportunity to be a head coach again and try to get Newark. This Newark team made the playoffs 2 years in a row once they changed classes and got in the division where they belonged. Missed out on it last year, and so he's looking to get the Yellow Jackets back in the playoffs.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one because Newark is, as we know, because of all the schools that have risen up, and you now, of course, have Newark Charter, which we'll talk about. The one thing I love about Coach Rice, he does have the experience as a head coach at Charter. So he was there, I believe, when the whole thing with the Blue Hen Conference started, when they just couldn't compete safely there. So he's been
Yep.
he's been in tough situations before. I think he's a great hire for this job. I love one of the things he said is that he knew he always wanted to coach. And when he started coaching at Newark, when he was an assistant with Simpson, Zender, and Russell, as you said, he soaked in everything he could and tried to take the best of all three of those guys. And then, of course, mix in his own stuff. But he even says, Newark's tradition is one of the best in the state. However, the addition of new charter schools, private schools, and VOTEC schools has completely changed the dynamic of the school district. He got into this job because he said, I know these kids, I love these kids, and it's my hope that I can not only help them with football, but in other aspects of a young person's life. And I always love when coaches say stuff like that, because I really do think a kid spends so much time with a coach that it's so important that they do pick up things from coaches. And, we know certain coaches are better than others. I can say when I was, an assistant coach basketball at Charter, I got to see Tran Rice a number of times, interact with his players, and I always came off as a really good guy. Always wanted to do the right thing, and a guy who really knows football. So this is going to be an interesting hire to see how he draws kids into the program, because I think that you and I would agree that's probably the number one priority right now for Newark is just keeping kids in the program and bringing new kids into the program. His big thing, when I asked him what his number one priority was, and I really love this answer. He says, we've been weightlifting and conditioning. We have the summer for 7-on-7, which of course is over now. It's important for our team to learn to fully commit time and effort to playing an entire season. That means, and I love this, having physicals done on time, having
Yeah.
every player make every practice, including the beginning of the season, learning during practice, and transitioning from enjoying their summer, having a great time, to a regimented football routine. He said, if we can do that, everything else will fall into place for itself. And he said, that's his priority right now as a head coach. I thought that was a great answer.
Yeah, the Christina district more than any, and I know this because I write for the Newark Post, as most people know, and that's the district that I cover. They have lost I hate to say it, but they've lost the commitment of the students. And sometimes that's at the fault of the parents for not making sure that they show up on the first day of practice with their physical. I mean, as Bobby Knight always said, the kids haven't changed, the parents have. And I'm not saying that's the case across the board, but, I hear stories about on day 3 of practice, a girl having a hair appointment at 10 o'clock in the morning. And you've known practice, it's no secret when practice starts. These coaches don't come up with these dates 24 hours ago. You can when the 15th falls for all sports except football, football's the week before, that practice is starting that Monday of the week that the August 15th is. And so don't make hair appointments at 10 o'clock in the morning. And so, that's going to be the first hurdle. I'm hoping to pop over to the Newark practice tomorrow just to see who's there. And you know what? And I hope I'm pleasantly surprised and there's 50 plus kids there, because if there's 50 plus kids there, that's a huge thing for Newark.
I agree. And last year I did a poll with the coaches and I basically asked, what's the most frustrating thing about the start of the season? And almost to a person, the people who responded, it was the physicals not being done on time. Because no kid wants to go, it's a nice day and it's hot in August, but you want to be out playing with your friends, swimming at the pool. Last thing you want to do is go to the doctor.
Right.
But you got to get it done, folks.
Yeah. And you can get it done in the spring at the wellness centers. That's where my two boys go. I mean, they have regular doctor's appointments every year, an annual appointment, but we take advantage of the wellness center and they go there. And they do it during the school day. Somehow they figured that out. But all right. So Newark was 4-6 last year, as we mentioned. They missed the playoffs, hoping to get back. They are going to install a new offense and a new defense. Taryn Rice he's going back to double sessions this year. They got away from that. Coach Russell chose not to at least the last year, maybe the last couple of years. But Rice said it's especially important since they're installing a new offense and the new defense. You got to have the guys there, even if they're not on the field in cleats and shoulder pads. They're going to be in a classroom learning plays and stuff like that. So big season for Newark High, big transition there. All right, let's go over the canal down south to Odessa, where Nick DeGotti is taking over for Dan Pritchman. DeGotti's been an assistant at Appoquinimink. He's also been an assistant at St. Andrews. He played at Delaware University, and I didn't realize this, Marty, until I saw it. You probably looked it up. He played in the Arena League as well.
Yeah, he did for 6 years.
Yeah, so and of course I do the PA announcing for Appoquinimink. It's where my kids go. Everybody, if listening to the pod, that. So I know Nick. I've never heard a bad thing about him. I haven't heard, when he got hired over at Odessa, I poked around a little bit at Appo, what do you think? And, and I was doing it to people who would have told me the truth. And they said, he's going to be great. He's a perfect fit over there. So, the Odessa Ducks 2-8 last year. So they're trying to get themselves, they moved up the class from class 1 to class 2. Last year was their first class of seniors. And so this is kind of like the second year where they've got a full group of seniors who have been with the program the entire time that it's been there.
Yeah, he is. First of all, he's 29 years old, and his energy level is off the charts. So I think this is going to be a really exciting hire for Odessa. That one of the things he loved about, and one of the reasons he applied for the job was he said he loved how the community responded and supported the program. Of course, he played with them when they because they played Appo in Middletown last year. They took it on the chin both times, but one thing he noticed was how hard everyone worked, and they worked from start to finish. So, he said, being a member of the community, I have a deepened understanding that they deserve to win. I love that because the support these people are giving, he feels like, hey, they deserve a winner, and I'm going to do what I can to get us there. He said, I saw these players. I believed in these players before they ever knew what my name was when he interviewed for this job. And he said, I saw them during the season. I saw film. I watched it when I was preparing for the interview. And he thought to come into a program that really still is in its infancy stages and to be able to put your stamp on it was just too good to pass up. And then I asked him what his first priority was when fall camp opened. And basically he started off when he met with the team the first time, he told them culture will outlive all of us. And the process and the routines that we implement will be here, for a long time. One of the first things he said, and I sent this to you, he said 2-8 is unacceptable, guys, which is what they were last year. He said, I wanted to make sure the expectation was that's not good enough. And I love that he added this too. He said, look, I know what you've been doing the last couple of years or whatever. We can't continue doing the same things and expect different results. So there's going to be changes. And, clearly this guy with the experience he has, he was successful in high school, college, at the pro level. He says something has to give, and it happens every day. We're at the pond. Something good happens. He is just so excited. He's mass social media user, and which is great with his age. It really connects with the kids. But he's set milestones for them, and he's couldn't be more excited to see where this goes. And right out of the gate, because I know they want to get to 3A. Right out of the gate, they
Yeah,
have Apo and Middletown
right.
again this year in the first 3 weeks. So it's going to be really interesting. Can't hold them to a certain level at that point, but
No.
they're going to find out real quick what they have to work with. But to your point, as this will be their second senior class. These kids have now been playing football for quite a while, and they've experienced some success. Dan Pritchard, they went to the playoffs his first 2 years under the new system. They didn't finish with a winning record either year, but because of the quirks in the system, hey, you make
Right.
the playoffs. You play with the schedule that's given to you, and they ended up making the playoffs. So the 2-8 last year in their first year in 2A was a little shock to the system, I
Yeah.
think. But it'll be really interesting. I mean, he's bringing his brother PJ, who will be the offensive coordinator, and apparently the Gotti name is like royalty in the MOT area.
Hmm.
So this is going to be really exciting. I think you have a bunch of he's brought in a good mix of young and experienced coaches, and it's going to be fun to watch the Ducks.
Yeah, when you bring in a guy who's played professionally in the sport to a high school program, it just adds a whole different layer of respect, I think. And the
I
last one
agree.
to do it was Cape Henlopen when they brought in Mike Frederick, who played in
Yep.
the NFL, and they were in the state championship game last year. And
Yes.
so you can doesn't mean it's going to happen automatically. It doesn't mean anything like that. But there is something to when you have a coach building a program who has played at the professional level. It just changes things a little bit. Now, you mentioned they play Apo and Middletown weeks 2 and 3. They open up with Lake Forest.
Yep.
And so that's a big game. It's going to be home at Odessa, should be a packed house. And that's going to be a game, Marty. If you lose that game and you're now realistically looking at probably being 0-3 out the gate, it's a little bit different if you can get off to a win, go take your punches, and I don't mean that literally. Weeks 2 and 3, you go, playing up a class,
Yep.
expected to lose, and you hope to make it respectable, and then you get back to your Class 2 schedule, and you thought, you know what, we did well that first week. Let's continue on that roll. So,
And
going to be
I
an
agree. And
interesting start.
that Lake Forest game, of course, is no gimme because Lake Forest
No,
is always tough
yep.
with Freddie Johnson down there. So it's going to be interesting to see how Nick Nick gets off too.
Yeah, you hate to say, but you can't be looking forward to week 2 before you
No,
finish off week
absolutely
1,
not.
and that would be an easy thing to do. So, all right, let's keep going south to Dover High School, where Maurice Polk has taken over for Chip Knapp. Knapp in several years coming from Wesley College. His last 2 years coaching, he made the championship game and made the semifinals last year. He resigned for personal reasons. Just I think he wanted to get out of high school coaching and get out of that. He'd been the coach forever,
Yep.
and et cetera, et cetera. And at least that's everything that we've heard. So Polk is taking over a program that's was turned into one of the best in Class 3A. He's a former assistant coach at Bowie State and 4 other colleges, also an assistant coach at Glasgow High School 2 different times once he graduated. And so, we talk about a professional coach. Dover now, for the second time in their program history, in recent history anyway, is going to have a coach who's been successful at the collegiate level as an assistant coach.
That's right. And this was and people can look this up if they want. This was the strangest coaching search for a long
Yeah,
time.
took forever.
It seemed to take several twists and turns from internal candidates to external candidates. And they finally landed on a guy. If you look at Maurice Polk's resume, it's spectacular. So it's really interesting to see, as you said, again, a second time they're bringing in a guy with college experience to take over the program. And I asked him, what drew you to this job? And he did the research. He said, they have excellent facilities. They have great community involvement. The program has had success. They have good numbers. And he said it was a great time. I saw this as a great opportunity for me to jump in as a first-time high school head coach. And his first priority is to lay down what his expectations are for the team. He said the first time we get together in the fall, it's important to lay out the foundation and the core values of the program and be clear what that will look like going forward. He said, as long as we do that, I'm confident that he's confident with his experience and his coaching staff that everything else is going to fall into place. We said they've had some great success there. I mean, in the last 2 years, they competed for the state title. It was basically the Jaquan Kilby story was the story of the last 2 years for Dover. His injuries really hurt them at the end of the season. They lost the state title 2 years ago, and then this year they were upset by Cape Henlopen in the first round. But they've got a lot of talent on that team. And the state of Delaware doesn't know a lot about Coach Polk, but again, based on his resume, he's got to be taken seriously. And jumping into a program with as much talent as Dover has, it's going to be real interesting to see the start he gets into against a really tough schedule. Of course, it's mainly an all 3A schedule, I think, after the
Right.
first game. But I don't know. It's an out-of-state team, I believe, the first game of the season.
Canarsie, New York.
Yeah, and then they jump in and they're nothing but 3A the
Yeah.
rest of the way. So, it'll be interesting to see how Coach Polk does.
Yeah, Canarsie to open it up, and then Apo right after
Yeah,
that. So again, could be 2-0, could be 1-1, could be
that's
0-2.
right.
So they're going to need to be ready to go. All right, before we talk about the last new coach, who's actually not a new coach, just has a new program, I want to tell you about Andre L Photography. Every senior has a story to tell, and at Andre L Photography, they bring these stories to life. Their portraits go beyond the traditional, capturing the essence of who they are in the pivotal moments of their lives. They create senior portraits that tell the authentic story of each student and their hard work. Celebrate your senior's journey by booking a session today at andreelphotography.com. Andre actually did some photos for my son Riley, who's coming into his senior year, and they were just outstanding. It makes me feel foolish every time I pull my cell phone out to take a picture anymore. So andreelphotography.com. That's andreelphotography.com. All right, last but not least, Newark Charter, the newest program in the state of Delaware. And the first new program we've had probably since Odessa, right, Marty?
Yeah, I
So
think so.
4 or 5 years ago. It's Jody Russell, former head coach at Newark Charter for 5 years. He was at Tatnall for 15 years. He grew up in Newark. His parents live in Newark still. Went to Newark High School. And Marty, the number of the spring for me was that he had 65 kids show up to spring workouts on the football field at Newark Charter Stadium, which is a brand new turf stadium, one of the nicest stadiums in the state. And so just a great start. And we'll see when they open up practice if all 65 are back. They've had a good summer. I've talked to them, workouts and stuff like that. So it's going to be an exciting time at Newark Charter.
It is, and one of the biggest things, and what attracted him was that obviously Newark Charter hasn't had any football players come to the school because anybody who wanted to play football certainly wouldn't come to Newark Charter because they didn't have a program. So he was really interested in who was going to show up and who was going to get in to the program now that they know they're going to have a football team. And what he has said, and he laid this out, he said this in the DIAA meeting a couple of weeks ago, was that they will be a 1A team starting next year. It's his hope. They're going to play JV this season,
Sure. Mm-hmm.
and I see they're still putting a schedule together there. But yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what a new program with Jody Russell at the helm is going to do, especially one that, as you said, I was shocked when I saw the number of kids that came out when they had that kind of informational session, see who's interested. And, Jody was excited about little things, ordering the blocking sleds and these shoulder pads and stuff like that. Because this school literally, I mean, he said that one of the biggest draws for him, and I'm sure he mentioned this to you as well, was you're walking in, you got a blank slate.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want here. And it just seems like it kind of reinvigorated him. He's had a lot of success over a lot of years. And this just seemed like a perfect opportunity to put his stamp on a program from the very beginning. And Jody's still a young guy. Hopefully he's going to be there for a long time, and hopefully he builds this program up. Be interesting to see the parallels between Newark Charter and Newark as they continue to go forward, the two high schools. But yeah, I think the fact that the informational meeting and the spring stuff drew out so many kids, and now they'll be getting kids who want to play football and will be coming to the school. Because, initially you and I talked about this in the spring, they're going to get a lot of kids who played, baseball, lacrosse, things like that, soccer, come out for the football team. So there's not going to be a lot of natural football players, most likely.
Yeah.
But if there's a guy who knows about the game and is going to get these kids ready to go, it's Jody Russell. So I think this is a great situation. The facilities are just incredible at Newark Charter. And I always love that, the newer schools like Odessa, Apo to a certain extent, as far as being a new school, DMA, the facilities at these places are incredible.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a huge draw for players there.
All right, yeah, I think I plan to cover the team pretty closely with the Newark Post starting this year when they have a JV season. Russell played at UD again, so a lot of respect there. What is going to be interesting, Marty, they still have, to the best of my knowledge, last time I asked, late in the school year, they still have that mile rule where you have to live within a certain distance
I
of the
looked that up
school.
too, and it appears to be still
Yeah,
the case.
which is going to limit the kids you can get, and
Yep,
but it is what it is. But like a lot of people have said, there's probably those big kids in that area. They just didn't bother coming to Newark Charter because
that's
they want to
right.
play football. And like you said, it wasn't like, oh, we don't want to go to Newark Charter because they have a bad football team. They don't have a football team. They have a
Right.
unified flag football team, but they don't have a tackle football team. And so that's changed, and it's going to be very interesting to see what that population looks like in 5 years in either case, whether they keep the 5 mile, I think it's five radius,
Yep.
or they change it. And if they change it, it could be a huge thing for that school. They could potentially be a 3A school down the road if they change it. If they don't change it, they may get to that 2A level and decide, or the committee might decide this is where we're going to
Yep.
be. So we'll
They
be
do have a
interested to see.
unified football title, right?
Yeah, two or three of them.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Wow.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. So they do have a state. In fact, it was the first team state championship at that school when they
Oh,
won the
that's awesome.
unified.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty
Okay.
cool. All right, if you're looking to buy or sell your house, Mary Kate Johnston with Remax Associates will help you do it as if it's her own. An award-winning realtor with nearly 20 years of experience. She's helped my wife and I sell our old house, purchase the new one we've been in for now 18 years. And we've also recommended her to plenty of friends who were all completely satisfied. Whether it's a first home or an upsize or downsize for yourself, an aging parent, or one of your children, do yourself a favor and reach out to Mary Kate Johnston with Remax Associates and make sure that you get the best value possible, whether you're buying or selling or both. Their website is marykatej.remax.com. That's marykatej.remax.com. And there you can check out our multiple 5-star reviews on Zillow and read what others have said as well. All right, our next new topic, Marty, and this is a big one. And we're going to try. We have several topics here, and we're not going. They're topics that literally we could probably spend 45 minutes on
That's
talking
right.
about in these next couple, but we're going to keep it short and sweet.
Yep.
Hopefully, there's going to be a new championship site. So the University of Delaware is, at least for now, out as the championship site for the four classes A or 1, 2, 3, class 1A, 2A, 3A, and unified, all played at the University of Delaware, and it's a simple reason. Last year's cost was $71,000 to hold the games there. And that was for that. You remember it was all, well, it was 2 day. It was a 2 day event, Friday
Yep.
night and
Yep.
Saturday. The previous year they had done it all on one day, but still $71,000 to host a high school state championship game, which in recent years has drawn, and I don't know the official figures, but if I had to guess, maybe 3,000 people at most for the 3A game is
Yes.
what I'm going to throw that number out there. And if it's not, I know it's close. It might be 3,500, might be less. But it's not. When Smyrna played in their first championship game several years ago, they drew about 10,000. And that kind of, I think there had been talk before that maybe they've, outgrown the stadium, meaning we can't fill it or come close to it, and so we need to
Yes.
move on. And then they had that game, and it's like, oh no, we couldn't have held this game anywhere else because there's not another stadium that holds 10,000. Now they're back in that 3,000 range, and so Executive Director Dave Baylor, with the blessing of the I assume the blessing of the football committee and the board, has decided to move it strictly for financial reasons. But it also does give an opportunity to try to get something located centrally. We know they're talking to Delaware State. I'll talk more about that in a second, and you probably have an opinion about that as well. Cape Henlopen, Dover High School, and Abyssinia Stadium are one down south, one middle state, and one north that are being considered as well. And so it's no decisions made as of today. I assume that decision is going to be made in the next few weeks before the season starts. And it's going to be interesting, keeping in mind the one rule that the two teams playing in the state championship game, one of them cannot be at their home stadium. So if Cape makes it, it can't be there. Dover makes it, can't be there. Sally's makes it, can't be there. And so there will be backup situations as well. I'll let you give your opinion,
Which,
Marty.
yeah, and I love this because I thought, the sort of aura of playing at Delaware Stadium, and it has kind of evaporated. And really, it's not, doesn't have anything to do with Delaware Stadium. It has to do with, and you brought this up, was the fan interest in coming to those games. When you put 3,000 people in a 15,000 seat stadium, it just seems empty, and it seems kind of sad. And it was glaringly so for the 1A game. Um, it just it really puts into relief how many people are interested in each of these levels, and it hurts these kids. I mean, these kids need to play, during the season, during the quarterfinals, the semifinals. They're playing in front of these huge crowds. They might only be 1,500 people, but they're 1,500 rabid people, and they're filling up all the seats where they're playing. And to put them in cavernous Delaware Stadium just didn't seem to make sense anymore either. I know a couple people on the board were in favor of kind of keeping that tradition going and saying, well, it's a treat for the kids. But let's face it, you and I were talking about this during the summer, whether it be baseball, lacrosse, soccer, football, these kids are playing at fields far beyond Delaware Stadium in their summer camps that they go to, their 7-on-7s.
Mhm.
I mean, they're going to 1A schools like Rutgers and Maryland to play 7-on-7. Um, those are not UD stadium types.
Right.
They're a little bigger, which Delaware, of course, will now be at the FBS level, but well, that's a
Mhm.
conversation again for another time too. But yeah, I like the fact that Dave Baylor was pretty set that Abysinio, if he has his way, will be the host for the 1A and the unified game. I'm sorry, the 1A and the unified game, and 2A and 3A would most likely be held downstate. Again, because you don't want Sally's to be at Abysinio, and
Mhm.
there'd be a rare instance too. They talked about Abysinio because, of course, St. Elizabeth uses it as a home field, so
Right.
and some other schools do too. So
Mhm.
they'd have to move some stuff around. But Dover, CR, Cape were mentioned as different stadiums. But I like the fact that they're looking outside the box. I did see there was a lot of interest in Delaware State. I like you, I would be very surprised if it's Delaware State. And this is no offense to Delaware State, and they are upgrading. I will say
Mhm.
there's a
Yeah.
great article on one of the HBCU websites. It may even be hbcu.com, but about the upgrades taking place at Delaware State. Once that happens, great. I think right now to do it unless that stuff is going to be done by November.
And it's not.
It's just not a great parking situation. Yeah, I
No.
don't think it is either. There's a huge upgrade going on. By
Yeah.
the way, I mean, people look this up. Delaware State did a massive and hats off to them, a massive fundraising effort. And they are really pouring a lot into the football program, which I think is fantastic, and hopefully
Mhm.
will be better for Delaware athletes. But especially now that the scholarship limits are going to go through the roof pretty
Right.
soon. But yeah, I like the campus sites as far as
Mhm.
Dover, CR, Cape, Abysinio, moving it around to different places, because I do think a huge part of this is playing in front of um, a crowd that's or stadium that supports the crowd that'll go in there.
Right.
It's funny for basketball, they could probably expand the stadium and they'd still sell that out. I mean,
Right.
basketball just goes nuts for the
Yeah.
championship games. When it was Smyrna and they were bringing buses of people, you and I watched the buses roll in the sea
Mhm.
of red. That doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
People, because there's options otherwise. You can watch the game on 302 Sports. You can watch the game on NFHS Network. And if the weather is not great, which it hasn't been in certain years, it holds back attendance as well. So
Mhm.
I kind of like this idea, and it always bugged me. And when I heard the price tag at the meeting, paying UD $70,000 for the privilege of using their stadium, I mean, that was a turnoff. And I know
Yeah.
Chrissy Rowick has done a good job with what she was brought there to do, which is basically fundraise. She hasn't exactly done a great job with community support gained in the high school area of
Mhm.
Delaware,
Right.
because all these schools are having to or the DIAA is having to pay all these fees to the University of Delaware, and a lot of it is that CSC security that they require
Yes.
you to use.
Yep.
So, and DIA has done a good job at their sites with quarterfinals, semifinals, things like that. So I think in the long run, this is going to be positive.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that you brought up the search security. That's a big. It's not a huge chunk of that 71,000, but it's probably 15,000 of it. And how that
Yeah.
works is the CSC security company tells their stadiums, and they do security for most of the major stadiums in the Mid Atlantic region. And actually, it's a national company. But
Hmm.
and what they do is they tell UD, given the size of the crowd, the areas we need to cover, this is the number of people that we need, and this is what it's going to cost. And so UD can't control that. It's not like you can negotiate. Let's just have one
Right.
person at the
Right.
back gate instead of two, type of thing. And so it is what it is. But I do agree. I'd be interested in how much the university has to pay for that day of championship games that they're profiting from it.
I agree.
You got to have custodians. You got to have your own people. I get all
Yep.
that, and that should be paid for. But then it's how much above that of your overhead are you making from? My quick thoughts on Dell State. I went to the girls soccer championship game 2 years ago that was held there. Parking was horrendous, and there will be a bigger crowd there than there was for the girls' state championship game. And I could just picture a grandma and grandpa coming to that game. And once that first lot is filled, right when you get into Dell State, parking is basically on your own. And you've
Right.
got to hope that you don't get towed. And there was parking in the streets, which made it tricky to walk from wherever you park to the stadium. So that's going to be a huge issue. An issue that I think is going to end up being shuttling people from the Dover Mall, which is literally just across the state. People are not used to that. If you go to Delaware at any game in high school in Delaware, you're not being shuttled anywhere. And so
Right.
that's going to raise a red flag for some people. There's the stadium seats 7,000. So I don't think there's going to be a sellout at Delaware State. I do think there could be sellouts at any of the other high school venues. And
Agreed.
so they're going to have to be prepared for that. Another thing they're going to have to really think through, Marty, I think. I know Sally's draws big crowds up at Abyssinia Stadium. I don't think they've ever had a sellout. And parking up there is not simple either because everybody said, well, they've paved that lot that used to just be all dirt and you could basically park wherever you wanted. Yes, they did pave it, but anytime you pave something and create a parking space, you eliminate parking spots that people
Yeah.
used to just create on their own there. So
Yes.
less cars can be parked at Abyssinia than could have ever been parked back in the day before it was Abyssinia Stadium. It's a great complex, but that would be interesting as well. So they might have to, high school football games have never sold out before. There's never been a sellout for a championship high school football
Right.
game. There realistically could be 3 this year, depending on what teams are in it and where they have it. And so that is going to be interesting to see. So that it's going to be an interesting pilot, for lack of a better term, of how they do this. They used to be held at Dow State back in the Troy Reeder era. The year Sally, I think it was the year Sally's either won or lost in a state championship in one of Reeder's years. I broadcast a game from Delaware State. And it was a great crowd. I don't forget, I had reserved parking since I was broadcasting, so I don't know what the parking situation was, and I was there 3 hours early, so it wouldn't have been an issue anyway. But anyway, so it'll just be interesting to see. But I know the DIAA is fully aware that there's going to be a big renovation, but it's not going to happen between now and remember,
Right.
Thanksgiving weekend is the weekend of the state championship games this year because of the way the schedule falls. And so the good thing if they have it at Del State is all the students are going to be gone. And
True.
so there'll be more parking spaces available. I'd be more concerned probably next year when the students are not gone and you arrive there on Friday night and there's 7,000 people on campus already or type of thing. So
Right.
again, they got to, they're going to think it through. Dave Baylor's done a great job, in my opinion, so far as the executive director. He's made right decisions, and when he's made decisions, he's looked for feedback for the pluses and minuses of the potential of the decision before he makes the decision. And so he's going to have all his I's dotted and his T's crossed before he announces where this is going to be.
And I love that one of his reasons when he said he was moving from UD and somebody talked about the possibility, well, you may have to raise ticket prices. And Dave jumped in very quickly and said, I am not raising ticket prices. So that was great to hear for people who love to go to these games.
Yeah.
Dave's like, look, no, we're not inconveniencing people just for the joy of playing at Delaware Stadium. That's not going to happen.
All right, so we will find out. Hopefully we know sooner rather than later. All right, athletes and students of all ages, unleash your potential with the Win the Day Planner, your key to building winning habits for a lifetime. It was put together by a local longtime wrestling coach, Dan Rigby, who led both Cesar Rodney and Milford High School to multiple championship appearances and a combined 3-state title. He's got 2 decades of experience teaching and coaching. What started out as an 18-week planner for one sports season quickly expanded to a 42-week one for the entire school year, and now it's just been released, a Win the Day Planner for non-student athletes. So the typical student, and I said this from the beginning when I got a copy of it for my son, that, this is a thing I could use for myself. I'm no longer a student, but students certainly could benefit from it. It doesn't just help you become a better athlete or student, but a better teammate, friend, and most importantly, a better person. Basically helps you organize your life. And a lot of kids need that this day. A lot of parents need that as well. Get your print or digital copy today at winthedayplanner.com. Again, that's winthedayplanner.com. All right, Marty, we're going to move on to the transfer rules. And I'll preface it by saying these rules have not gone into place yet because John Carney has not put his signature on the resolution or regulation or whatever you want to call it. And somebody asked me, he said, is this something he's got to do like at an official press conference and that's what's holding it up? Or can anybody go deliver it to him and just have his signature on it? I don't know the answer to the question, but I do know this. the longer it takes for him to sign this transfer rule. So the official fall season for football starts tomorrow. We're recording this on Sunday, August 4th. It starts Monday, August 5th. And the big talk had been, until this gets signed, you can transfer under the old rules. And so if this thing isn't signed before practice tomorrow, and a week from now, somebody wants to transfer after it's signed, are they going to be allowed to under the old rules because it wasn't enacted before this season? I don't know the answer to this question. I don't think you know the answer to this question. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. And to me, it's critical, if the answer is that if it doesn't get signed before tomorrow, anybody can transfer this coming year without penalty. That's going to be a shame.
It is. And I'll tell you two things I've heard. I asked a member of the state government. It does not need to be any kind of ceremonial thing. He can pull it out of his desk and sign it tomorrow, is the understanding of this person, who's a state senator. And the second part of it is, one of the DIAA board members I talked to said they believe that he's going to sit on this because if it were to be signed now, there would be so many issues of precedents that you don't want to establish, because you got all these kids who transferred up to this point, and then the kids, as you said, that transfer after this point. Well, why are they going to be treated differently just because they happen to pull this out on a Monday afternoon and decide to sign it, when this kid transferred, a week ago and now has no penalty whatsoever? So, if I had to guess, I'm guessing they're not going to put this in place until next season. And I think for Dave Baylor's benefit, that would probably be the best thing to do, because I could see this creating a nightmare for him, in trying to follow this through if it's signed at some point very soon.
Yeah.
And I did ask this person who's in state government what the holdup is, and the answer is I have no idea.
Yeah.
They say, some of these things get signed right away, some take months to sign. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I do know that in some cases they've been authorized to make hires for the DIAA, to expand the DIAA. I
Right.
know they've got some of those hires in place, but they can't officially do it because this stuff hasn't been signed yet.
Yep.
So it's going to be interesting. But this transfer rule, and we'll talk about in a minute, but yeah, this could create a nightmare scenario for Dave Baylor if it goes through very soon.
Yeah, it's gonna. I didn't even think about your point about they could wait and do it for basketball season. But again, I think you still have the same issue. My kid wants to transfer, in December to go play basketball for educational purposes, and I'm
Yep.
using air
Yeah.
quotes, of course, because that rule hasn't changed.
Yes.
And you let somebody do it in the fall. Why can't my kid do it in the winter? And so but I hadn't thought about that. That certainly could be what they're thinking too. But it's going to be interesting. All right. So again, we could talk for this about that point of this topic for a while, but what it is, most of you probably know what it is. It's been in the news. You basically get a free transfer before the first day of your junior year. Now, again, what is the first day of your junior year? Is it the first day of summer practice, which is tomorrow for football and next Monday for everybody else? Or is it the first day you go into school? And again, I don't know that answer. Marty, do you know the answer?
No, I don't answer.
So,
I don't either.
we'll move on from that question, but maybe somebody, if they do know the answer, can let us know that. So after your junior year, if you transfer, you sit for the first 30 days. And that is 30 days from the first game, not the first practice. So in some sports, you're missing half the season, basically, depending on the sport. So
Yeah, in football, that could be 4 or 5 games.
right, yeah, half the season. And so
Yep.
and that's the thing with that. So, and then your second transfer is 30 days and no playoffs. And so why would you bother transferring? You wouldn't.
Which is the
Unless it's
whole
for
purpose.
academic.
Yeah. Yep.
So, so that's I like the rule. They did it primarily off basically what Kentucky does, something similar to like that. I get it. If you're a freshman and you don't like your school and you want to transfer, you should be able to do it by penalty. Basically, if you do it after your sophomore year, then people really start thinking, are you really doing it for educational and social purposes, or is because you want to go win a state championship somewhere?
Right.
And so for instance, under this rule, the big, John Parker, who transferred from Dover to Middletown as a senior, I believe is a senior, right? I
He
think
is a
he's
senior.
Yeah. So he wouldn't be doing this if the rules were different, because he'd have to miss half the season and he couldn't play in the playoffs. And Middletown, quite frankly, probably wouldn't want him. I mean, they would take him certainly, but they wouldn't, be itching for him to get there. So, that's the best example I can think of what this new rule is going to do. It's going to eliminate, and I'm not blaming John Parker. He's doing what he thinks is best for him and his family and everything else, and that's fine. He's following the rules. This rule would prevent that from most likely happening, and that's the purpose of it. And so I like the rule. I hope they get it put in sooner rather than later, and get that passed. And also because, as you said, Marty, the DIAA has 3 people they can hire, and
Yep.
they've already started the interview process. And from what I understand, they've decided one of those people already,
Yep.
but they can't hire them until this thing passes. And we all know DIAA staff needs help, not because they're not competent. They're very
Yep.
good. They need more people. They can only do so much or so many hours in a day.
And I do know that there is still going to be, for people have listened to the DIAA meetings, there still is going to be a waiver process of sorts. However, that process will be handled entirely by Dave Baylor himself, which I love. Because if you listen to Dave Baylor in these meetings, first of all, he's a very, very fair guy. There's no,
Yep.
you detect no bias when you
No.
hear Dave Baylor talk. Um, but he's also going to have something that maybe some other DIAA directors didn't have, and that's teeth behind it, because this legislation, when it's signed, is going to give him more authority. And I really think that this guy was the right person at the right time for the right job. And again, if you're anybody who's listened to these meetings, or you can go back and listen to them, Dave is very forceful, and he's a guy who's not going to let things slide. He wants things done by the rules. I mean,
Yep.
his main thing is, I want people to do things the right way,
Right.
and that's how it's going to be. And
Mm-hmm.
again, with some teeth behind this, I think he's the perfect guy for this job. I also have been there. There's been some things that you and I know didn't agree with. I know the handshake thing, which they were trying to do something right there, and people can go back and listen to that, whatever. But all in all, I think Dave has done a fantastic job in the beginning of this. And once the new board is in place and the new powers are given to Dave to handle some of this stuff that the board really doesn't need to be involved in, I think we're going to start to see a much clearer process again with these 3 positions that are being hired, one of which is a compliance officer, which Delaware has never had in the DIAA before, which is someone who's going to vet some of this stuff, these transfers that are happening, to go back to your air quotes, the quote unquote, for athletic purposes only, addresses that seem kind of fishy, which we've heard over
Mm-hmm.
the years.
Yep.
This person will look into that stuff. And Ohio, I was looking at their high school setup, and they have a whole investigative board. Now,
Yep.
granted, it's a bigger state, but Delaware didn't even have a person who was doing this.
Right.
So it's going to be good to see going forward that this will establish, I think, a more level playing field in terms of kids that want to transfer for the right reasons, and kids that maybe are trying to skirt the system.
So it'll be interesting to see. Hopefully it gets signed. John Carney, if you're listening to this, please pull that thing out of your pocket and get it signed so we can move it forward one way or the other. Get it moving. All right, we got to still talk about name, image, and likeness. But before we do, we've got a new sponsor this year. It's the Promotion Zone Player of the Week. When you want to promote your organization, product, or anything else, Promotion Zone can help you make the right decisions based on your needs and budget, whether it's apparel, pens, coffee mugs, or something out of the ordinary. Promotion Zone is your one-stop shop for all your branding needs. Celebrating their 15th year in business, they're located right here in Delaware. So you're working with people who understand the value of hometown business relationships. You can check them out on Facebook at Promotion Zone DE, or on their website at promotionzone.biz. You want to call them? 302-832-8565. And the best part is you talk to a human being. 302-832-8565. Promotion Zone, the swag folks since 2009 for all your branding and apparel needs. And they're going to provide our Player of the Week with a t-shirt, a Delaware High School Football Podcast t-shirt that we will send directly to the players each week. So what we plan to do is we plan to announce a 1A, 2A, and 3A Player of the Week. And then out of those 3, there will be the Promotion Zone Player of the Week, and we'll be sending the t-shirt to that person. We also have the Unit of the Week. That's Diamond Hill Incorporated. For more than 20 years, they've been serving all of Delaware and the surrounding areas in all things construction, from commercial concrete and site development to residential products. They have you covered. You can email info@diamondhillinc.com for more information. That's info@diamondhillinc.com. And we appreciate them returning as a sponsor of the Unit of the Week.
And, I just want to say real quick about Promotions Plus. That is, John and I made the strategic decision to not include our faces in the logo, which we will use for the t-shirts.
Yep.
So anybody worried about, oh my God, I got to wear these 2 guys' different faces on my shirt.
Right.
We went with a different logo.
Don't
that
pick
will
me
just
for Player of the Week.
That's right. That will just highlight the
yep.
Delaware High School Football Podcast.
And that's Promotion Zone.
Promotion Zone. I'm sorry, I do that every time.
Player of the Week. Yeah, no, it's a common mistake, I'm sure. But
I'm so excited
Zone,
about having them as a sponsor. I can't wait to get my own t-shirt. I want to get a t-shirt.
No, that'd be great. Yep. All right, so let's talk about name, image, and likeness. It's been passed by the board. at a vote of 8-6, which always concerns me, Marty.
Me
Like, I
too.
almost think it is a majority, but it's a close vote. And so that concerns me. First of all, 33 other states allow it. The schools are not involved in it. And that's the difference between the colleges who are hiring staff to manage name, image, and likeness and what's going to happen here in Delaware if it does get passed. And again, this is another thing that hasn't been passed yet. Probably won't be this year, would be my guess, that this is
Yep.
going to raise enough concerns that it's not going to be passed this year. It's not going to be cash like it's going to start in colleges now. It's going to be, I think, primarily sports equipment. There was talk of how there's some field hockey players that are big enough stars that go to camps and stuff that they could be getting sticks from companies and stuff like that. I always wondered if, my son could get goalie gloves, as again, another easy thing for somebody to provide that, when they see him playing on the field, they can see goalie gloves, that type of thing. But here's what I want to ask you, Marty. I don't think the rule will be against somebody and pick any school you want who's got a parent who owns a car dealership here in the state of Delaware, who could tell these 5 kids from wherever they play now in the state of Delaware, if you come play at my kid's school, I'll give you each a car. Right? I don't think it's not going to happen, but I don't think it's illegal, right?
It is only in that if it's specifically to get them to come to the school.
Oh, this would be for educational purposes,
right. This would be something. But you and I both know this would be where the compliance officer would come in.
Right.
There's nobody going to be as bold to do that, though. It is. Look, there are going to be temptations here. I went in and actually did some research, and by the way, the number there's a website that tracks NIL legislation. It's up to 39 states now, to some one degree or another, that have it, including some that just passed this past July. Alabama, it's still illegal. If a kid takes money for anything, you lose your high school playing ability. But I heard from so many coaches when this got passed, and there was a lot of angst. And this is going to be, boy, Sally's and Middletown and St. Mark's. These schools are going to be flourishing with kids transferring in because they're going to get this money. And if you go to Pennsylvania and look at their NIL deals, because a lot of them are public, there's hardly any.
Yeah.
And they're the top, like you're one of the top 50 players in the ESPN 300 recruiting.
Right.
I don't think this is going to have an impact. I think a school, and again, we point out Sally's because they're just the biggest school and they've got probably the biggest alumni base in terms of monetary value.
Right.
They're not going to do something stupid to bring attention to themselves in something like this, because I think once it is passed, it's going to be so heavily scrutinized by Dave and the compliance officer that I just don't think there's going to be a lot of it. There were a lot of public school coaches that DM'd me at the time and said, I'm going to lose my best players to this. And my response was, why?
Right.
Why would they leave? Because if they're being promised something, that's against the rules. And as we know, this stuff tends to have a way to come out.
Yeah.
I do think this is always going to be fraught with danger. I heard, and there's some ridiculousness to it. One of the DIAA board meetings, one of the people was like, well, how do we educate these kids on taxes? I don't know. How do you educate a 16-year-old who has a summer job at McDonald's on how to do his taxes?
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous. It's basically the equivalent of a summer job.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything, you can't penalize kids for making money based on their name, image, and likeness going forward. That's just going to be the rule of the land. It's the way things are. We may not like it. It's the reason why Nick Saban and some of these guys got out of the business.
Yep, no doubt.
Nick Saban was quoted as saying, look, I walked into a kid's room and one of the first questions out of his parents' mouth was, well, how much money could he get in NIL?
Right.
He's like, we're not doing this.
Yeah, no.
And eventually, as you probably have seen, it's going to get to the point. It's working its way through the system now where schools are going to be actually able to pay the players themselves. And at that point, we've gotten to a full pay for play.
Yep. You're talking about the college level. At the college level.
At the college level.
Yeah.
There's a kid that was promised a $13 million NIL deal to come to Illinois. It eventually fell through. But at the high school level, I just don't see, and this is no offense, you and I love Delaware. This is the whole reason we do this. We love sports in Delaware, football in Delaware. There's not enough high marketability of the
Right.
athletes in Delaware right now to get any kind of big NIL deals. Now, the young lady at Ursuline, the sophomore, I think her
Hmm.
name's Gigi, they call her.
Yep.
She's probably the biggest athlete name-wise in Delaware because I've seen her name on recruiting websites everywhere. Von Brandt.
Hmm.
From
Yeah.
Appo,
Could be
another
another one.
kid
Yep.
that is going to all these big schools.
Yep.
And kids like that are going to draw the attention. But to your point, I'd be much interested more in the kids like your son Riley and some of the other kids that field hockey kids, things like that, that get the gloves and the equipment. Because I think that's more what this is geared toward, and people are panicking because they're taking the top 1%
Right.
and saying, well, this is what the worst case scenario. That's just not gonna happen in Delaware.
Yeah. And the thing that I keep seeing or I keep hearing is we're going to lose players to Maryland and New Jersey and to
Yes.
Pennsylvania. And you know what? That's going to be two or three players over a 4-year time period. As you said, we can name two people right now who
Yep.
might be able to benefit from name, image, and likeness, two out of hundreds or thousands probably. And you know what, my opinion, then go play out of state. Go play somewhere else
And you know what? They
if
might
that's
do it
why you're doing it.
anyway.
And they might do it
Yes.
anyway because there're
Yep.
going to be more available.
Exactly.
I would love to. I'd love to see the decision overturned, quite frankly, and let's not do it because to me, there's no huge benefit to it, and
No,
we're
it
gonna.
just creates
It
more
creates some
problems.
problems.
Yep.
Exactly.
Agreed.
It's anyway. So we'll keep you posted on that as it comes up. All right, we still got to do our Marticelli trivia question, which we're going to do. We got one more quick topic, but also a new segment will be the Grain Gridiron College update, and we want you help with this. Basically, we're going to try to keep you apprised of who's doing what at the next level during this segment, and we can only do that if we hear from you. And Marty wanted to make sure to let people know that, we need to hear from you as to how we can get, that information. Some of it we can see on social media, some of it we can't. So whether you're the parent, the coach, a friend, if somebody has a great game at the college level who played high school football here in Delaware, let us know. You can send us direct messages, emails, all that's available on Twitter and Facebook, that kind of stuff. But that's going to be sponsored by Grain Restaurants that has 4 locations, the Summit Marina on the C&D Canal and Bear, in Lewis at the Ferry Terminal, and their newest location on the Star Campus in Newark across from Delaware Stadium. And so we're excited to have them back as a sponsor. If you remember, they did the Player of the Week last year and gave away gift cards. We weren't able to do that to the players. That's why we switched that out. So now the
Yep.
player will get the T-shirt from Promotion Zone. But Grain is still staying involved. And one of their co-owners is Jim O'Donohue. His son's playing at Delaware. So it might be, again, a segment where we talk about what he's doing at the University of Delaware. We're trying to come up with a fancy name for this. Grain Gridiron College Update. It's kind of blah. That was my idea. But so we're going to ask you, help us come up with a name for this segment. The Grain Gridiron something, or gridiron doesn't have to be in it. But it is the unit of the week. Could be an offensive line, could be a team, could be, kicker, center, and holder for a field goal unit, whatever like that. So let us know your thoughts on that. All right, we're going to go on to the Marticelli Restaurant Group. They own the Chesapeake Inn, Klondike Kate's, and La Casa Pasta. And we're going to have a trivia question every week like we did last time. And Marty's going to come up with it and manage all that. So, Marty, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, we're going to go back 12 years for our first trivia question of the year. I brought this up because of the 5 new head coaches this year. First of all, the 2012 All-State football team featured 3 guys who went on to play in the NFL, which is crazy. I didn't even realize that until I started looking through these lists. This individual, and he's one of our 5 new head coaches, was first team All-State at offensive tackle and first team All-State at linebacker in 2012. So for a chance at a $50 Marticelli gift card, good at Klondike Kate's, La Casa Pasta, or Chesapeake Inn, who was that player? Again, he's one of our 5 new head coaches that we talked about earlier. 2012, first team All-State offensive tackle, first team All-State linebacker.
All righty,
Oh,
there
and you
you go.
send your answers by Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. We're trying to have a cutoff date for this. Wednesday evening at 8 p.m., send your answer to DELHSfootball@gmail.com. That's DELHSfootball@gmail.com. Or you can inbox John, myself, or our pod account on X or Twitter, as I'll always end up calling it. But by Wednesday at 8 p.m., we'd like to have the response, and we'll announce the winner every week.
All right, that's the Marticelli Restaurant Group trivia question of the week. We can't thank them enough for supporting our podcast and in turn supporting high school football here in Delaware. All right, last topic, Marty. This is week 0 is the opening game, Labor Day weekend. There's Thursday games, Friday games. I think there's a Saturday game. There's 14 games total. I went through and counted. If I counted correctly, it's 14. If it's, I might be one off. That means 28 of the Delaware High School schools are now playing in week 0.
Yes.
Those of you new to Delaware, week 0 started, I think it was right after COVID. I forget when it was, when some of these schools wanted to play a week earlier because that's when they could play out of state teams in a lot of cases because they had already started. The DIAA allowed it. And then you had to get permission. They had to get an executive session to approve
every meeting. There's
every single
waivers.
meeting. And smart enough, they did away with that. Let's give them credit for that. So now anybody can play on week 0. 28 teams means half the state is playing on week 0. So my suggestion is let's not call it week 0 anymore.
Please stop.
It's week 1 and there's a week 11 and everybody's going to have a bye. It's worked okay for the NFL for the last 100 years. That's just the reality of it. Let's forget the week 0. Nobody gets it. Nobody understands it. Is that a scrimmage? What do you mean week 0?
Exactly.
What is week 0? So, let's do away with week 0. There's 11 weeks to the Delaware High School football season. It starts on week 1, ends on week 11. Everybody's got a bye. This year, half those byes would be on week 1, and everybody else would have a bye at some other point. So that's my beef. Marty, you
agree 100%. Every time I see it in the newspaper or somebody writes something on Twitter or Facebook, and I'm like, week 0. Most people don't know what that means. What is week 0? 0 is the absence of anything. Right. So it's just a ridiculous number. Week 1, as you said, 28 Delaware teams are going to be playing, for God's sake, which is more than 50% of the state. So yeah, let's just start with week 1. College is still doing it's ridiculous. I know. Shout out to by the way, Delaware State with all this stuff we talked about today. Delaware State's going to Hawaii to play on August 24th for the first game of the regular season. What a nice trip for those kids. They're calling it a week 0 game. I'm like, oh God, please, college. As you said, the pros, they added bye weeks over the years, but you know what they didn't add? They didn't add a week 0 to anything. They just made week 16, 17, and 18. Right. So yeah, let's just all agree to go to week 1 through week 11. Then we get to the playoffs. Week 0 is out.
All right. So that's going to do it. Speaking of out, that's going to do it for us. Our next podcast is going to be on Sunday, September 1st, which will be the first podcast after what is now we're going to call week 1 of the football season.
There you go.
When those 14 games will have taken place. So we'll be able to talk through that like we always do. We appreciate all of you tuning in. Again, we want to thank all our sponsors, Grain Restaurant, Marticelli Restaurant Group, Promotion Zone, Diamond Hill Incorporated, Mary Kate Johnston with Remax Associates, Dan Rigby, author of The One-Day Planner, and Andre L. Photography, and of course, our presenting sponsor, Websites for Sports. That's websitesforsports.com. If you're a sports player, parent, or fan, it's the only website with the schedule of every high school and middle school team, stats, and more. Don't forget to follow us on X and also on Facebook. Just Google the Delaware High School Football Pod, and our images show up for you. And please like and share our podcast to help us spread the word about the wonderful sport of Delaware High School football. And that's going to do it for today. Until next time, for Marty Sheehan, I'm John Buzby. Have a great sports week.